Welcome to the Motivated Martial Arts Podcast. Your hosts, Jackson White and Gavin Cook, have been friends and TaeKwonDo training partners for over 40 years. This podcast will bring you a mixture of their life stories, martial arts, and business experiences to motivate you in life and throughout your martial arts journey. Adding in a mixture of inspiring interviews and some of the best traditional martial artists around today. So over to your hosts, the Motivated Martial Artists.
Welcome to the Motivated Martial Artists Podcast with me, Gavin Cook.
And me, Jackson White.
And this evening we've got TAGB's very own Debbie Hill on the show. Thanks for coming on the show this evening, Debbie.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. It's good to be here.
That's all right. No, great to get you on. And I have to say, you're kicking off season 3, by the way. The Motivated Martial Artists season 3, 2 years. Jackson, can you believe it? No wonder we're
it's flown by, isn't it? Yeah. No wonder I'm growing bored having to speak to you every week.
Yeah, every week for 2 years. So so it's been a journey, and it's good to kick off season 3, really. So
we're all keen to hear about your journey in martial arts, Debbie. So why don't you give us a bit of a background to our listeners about you growing up, your education, your environment, and I suppose how you got into martial arts?
Yeah, I think there's nothing special about my kind of upbringing, really. It's pretty normal. I was born in Northampton and we lived there for a little while. We moved to Manchester for about 3 years.
I was going to say, you've gone up in my estimations now, knowing that you're from Northampton, but then you mentioned Manchester and you just plummeted again.
I mean, I was really young. That wasn't my fault.
I bet can you remember the lift tower?
No.
the big lift tower, the big Northampton lighthouse, they used to call it, didn't they?
I was very, very young.
Okay.
We moved down to the southwest of England when I was about 10, and I currently live in a lovely little town called Frome in Somerset. So I kind of basically grew up here. Pretty normal education. Enjoyed sports, lots of sports at school, all of them. I was pretty popular in the netball team because I've always been really tall. So I was quite popular as a player in the netball team, not necessarily to the other teams that we played, obviously. They used to kind of look me up and down and be, oh, no, you're joking. I played goalkeeper, so blocking out all the goals. And then, anything really at school, tennis, hockey, anything. I was always doing something at lunchtime and after school, that kind of thing, which was really good. So I've always been quite sporty and just doing school sport, really. I never did anything community-wise. Went on to do my A-levels, and that's kind of when the sport kind of dried up a little bit at school. It's not so readily available to you. So that was kind of when I was looking outside of that, and there was posters up in the town for Taekwondo, which I was a bit like, I could tell it was martial art, but I'd not really heard of it. It's not, karate was much more well known. So I kind of fancied doing a martial art, always had. And then I saw these posters for a brand new club, and that kind of appealed because everybody would be new at the same time. So I thought, I'd give it a go, but I didn't really know what Taekwondo was. I think it had on the poster something like, Korean martial art, and it had TAGB is here, but I read it as like Tagba, and I was like, what's Tagba? I had no idea what that was at the time.
Okay, so who was your first instructor then?
Mr. Andrew Tomlin was the instructor, and he still is my instructor. I still train with him regularly at the club that I started at. So when I sort of saw those posters come up, he had a demo going, and it was on a Saturday, and I had a Saturday job at Boots, and I couldn't go. So my sister and my best friend at the time went and watched the demo, and they were like, yeah, no, it's really good. So we all kind of trekked along for the first ever lesson in Frome. That was the 24th of February, 1992, and been there ever since, basically.
I bet they're not still competing, are they?
Well, no, exactly. One of my best friends stopped before she got her black belt. Me and my sister did get our black belts together, but then she stopped. She wasn't much of a competitor anyway, but we did that journey together. She did come back for a little bit, but she is much more into kind of running and marathons and stuff, which is definitely her thing, not mine.
Yeah, there's not many that stay the course, though, is there? When you look back, certainly when you're an instructor and you look back at all the students that have come and gone over the years,
I think there was around 20, 25 people on that session. and there's only two of us left. So me and Richard Latham are the only two that are left from the original group.
Gosh. So what was it that got you into it then? What did you like? Because we hear lots of different stories about those first sessions, and normally people are really enthused from that first session, whether it's the techniques, the kick-in, the sweat, or the fear, or even the instructor. So what was it that really got you to stay?
Yeah, well, I just really loved that first session. I remember kind of just doing sitting stance punch, and I mean, even that is a challenge, when you're kind of struggling with your left and your right and your balance and everything. And I remember that particularly, like I say, everybody was a beginner, so it was hard to see the progression really, because you couldn't really, and I missed the demo, so I didn't see any of those kind of kicks and stuff. I just really enjoyed the session. Mr. Tomlin has got a really nice way about him, and he was funny and he pushed you hard, but
don't tell him he's funny. He'll never stop with his jokes when we see him.
Well, exactly. Just a really nice friendly session, and worked, like you say, the working hard part of it, that sweating, the nerves of it, the kind of learning something completely new, and I felt a little bit like, like I'm on the journey of being a karate kid or something like that,
Yeah, but it is difficult, like you say, when you get a brand new beginner group and you can't really see what comes after, can you? It's like, well, I'm doing this, and I suppose it's not until later on when you start getting introduced to the senior members and the black belts, and you start, you start looking up to them a little bit more, don't you? And thinking, yeah, I want to be able to do that. I want to be able to do a flying kick, or when you watch them sparring or whatever, you can't. When you're a beginner, it's like, I can't wait to be doing that. Exactly,
and people started to come over to the club from other clubs. So, like you say, we started to see that a little bit more. And I remember there used to be quite a few guys coming over from a nearby town, but they were only sort of about green belt. But at the time, that was still like, oh my god, they're green belts, kind of thing.
It's like just entering senior school, isn't it? Look how big they are.
Exactly, and they were strong and they worked hard, and there was some really good people around the area that used to come and train as well. So we did get that inspiration from those higher grades, definitely.
Yeah, it's one of the benefits as well about being part of a bigger organisation, isn't it? You've got that, you can start your beginners class, but you can always bring more higher members from other clubs in.
Yeah, in the Southwest, we kind of have this reciprocal agreement that you can train anywhere in the Southwest. You pay your fees to your instructor, but you can train anywhere in the Southwest, and that's really brilliant. And that means that we do get to see lots of different people from different clubs in the area, and makes us one big family, really.
Well, it's just, you get more diverse as a student as well, don't you? If you train, because everyone's got their own way of teaching. They've got their favourite stuff that they do over and over again without even realising you're doing it. And all of a sudden you go to I mean, I'm always encouraging my students to go to other instructors. I think it's good for them,
Yeah, definitely. And when you go and train with other people, they spot things on you that your own instructor doesn't see, because you almost go snowblind to seeing it, and you get picked up on all sorts of things you didn't realise you were doing wrong.
Yeah. You might even get to see Jackson's kicks above the waist if you're really lucky. every now and again.
Only after I've had a sauna and I'm feeling really flexible. So, where did you gravitate to? Because I know Taekwondo is very much line work based. Certainly back in the 90s and 80s when Gavin and I were participating at that level, very much line work based, very much patterns based, and then you'd spar. So there weren't, I don't really recall doing much pad work and, all the diverse things that we do now to keep the students enthused in the art. So what was it that you gravitated towards?
I quite liked all of it, really. Like I say, the learning the different techniques, it was all challenging. It was all alien to me, really. And, working to each grade, and you'd see the other grades at different patterns. You'd be like, oh, I want to do that pattern, and you're kind of building up to seeing it get slightly harder and harder and that kind of thing. We did start doing some sparring in the class as well, and I did quite enjoy that. I enjoyed the physicality of that, and so I was drawn to that, and only really got more enthusiastic about that after entering kind of my first tournament, really.
So what grade were you when you entered your first comp?
I was a yellow belt, and it was one of our regional competitions.
And how did it go? Talk us through that first bout.
Again, just like, you feel like you're living in a movie in your first competition, don't you? And it's like, I remember going along to that and just kind of no expectation on myself, really. So that was nice. And I got through my first round, which I don't really remember greatly. I just remember being shocked that I won, and it was point stop, obviously, and I think the score was something like, 2-1 or something. It wasn't massive.
Lots of knees clashing, lots of elbows.
Yeah, just managed to score randomly with a punch that finally reached a target, that kind of thing. And I remember getting through the rounds and getting through to the final. And back then they used to do the finals at the end of the day. And I remember thinking my foot really hurt. And I just kind of carried on, and everything else was happening during the day. And I was resting up for the final at the end. And I did the final at the end. I didn't win. I got a silver, but I was more than pleased with that in my first ever tournament. But then my foot that had been hurting all day started to kind of bruise up a little bit and go quite black. And it turns out I'd broken the toe next to my little toe, like early on. But I was so hyped with adrenaline that it didn't really kick in until the final had finished.
Yeah, sure.
So even that didn't put me off, apparently. But yeah, obviously the silver medal helped to kind of soften the blow.
Yeah, so presumably you was hooked from that day onwards then.
Yeah, I just really enjoyed that competition element. Like I say, I'd always done like school sport and been in school teams and stuff. So I guess there's competitiveness in me. So that allowed me to have that outlet, I suppose, in martial arts to compete.
Yeah,
so throughout the syllabus, then, did you ever find any particular part of the syllabus extremely hard to the point where you actually questioned whether you wanted to push through to your black belt?
I don't think I was necessarily a natural. I really struggle with stances because I'm 6'1", and actually I was just constantly being told to make my stances longer, make your stances longer, make your stances wider, make your stances longer. And I really struggled with that, and probably all the way up to kind of black belt really, before it kind of massively clicked what I needed to do to make them look better. That was probably the hardest thing. The physicality of it, generally not so. Coordination is something completely different to any other sport though, isn't it? The coordination needed for patterns and stuff like that. So that would have been a bigger challenge for me as well.
I suppose something I found with a lot of my students, particularly my older students, late teens and young adults, it's being able to work to instruction. Step forward with your left leg, punch with your right hand. Yeah. And you can just see their brains, because they, generally, unless they've been involved in an instructional type of sport, gymnastics, where they need that body spatial awareness, those neural pathways just haven't connected, have they? So you've got to build that up, and it's quite challenging, I think, as a young adult or even an adult getting into that environment straight away.
By far, that would have been the biggest challenge for me. I'm like long arms and legs, and trying to coordinate that was kind of tough to start with.
Especially when you think about the sports you do at school. So tennis, you're using one arm, football, you're using one leg, netball, you're using the same arm. All of a sudden you're asked to do something on your right side, and then they get on the left side, and you can see people losing the plot, can't you? TaeKwonDo dyslexia, I call it.
Yeah, definitely that.
No, good. So, and then can you remember your first grading?
Yeah, it was at Bristol Academy. So I did all of my gradings at Bristol Academy. All my colour belt gradings, and then obviously all my black belt gradings. So it was just, for many years, just entering the building just brought me into a sweat, because it just reminded me of grading.
Just the smell or the look, and you get that association, don't you?
Totally. I just remember it being, I think they started with the higher grades and worked down to the lower grades. And I remember being, like you said, I was in a club that was all fairly new people. So that was probably the first time I'd seen sort of the higher grades doing things, and was like, wow, it was when Black Stripes had to spar 2-on-1. I don't know if you remember that. Yeah, they did a 2-on-1s kind of sparring. So that was really fascinating. But I just remember it being really, really long. I can't remember what time it started, but I'm pretty certain I didn't get home till 10 o'clock at night.
I was going to say, if it's anything like the ones we used to do in Warwick, we'd start at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning. You'd still be there at 10 o'clock. Yeah. Not allowed to leave the hall.
Yeah. I just remember it being incredibly long and all kind of cramped into the back of the dojang in the academy, which hasn't got a lot of space. But I remember it being really long. But after that, I think they split them up a little bit more, so there was less clubs in each of the gradings. So they were never that long again. But we were always at the academy, which was, I think, for me, really special.
Yeah, 2 against 1 sparring. I think we should put a request in to the committee to bring that back at green belt level.
Yeah. They were the fun days, weren't they, where you could do things like that. I don't think we get away with it these days, Gavin, to be fair.
And also, blue belts did destruction, so that was the first time I'd seen that as well in the
grading. Yeah. People kicking the wood with pure power, breaking it anywhere. And of course, now you've got the breaking boards. Unless you hit them dead in the centre, they don't move, do they?
The thing is, when you think about the destruction side again, it's very seldom is it done at all now, isn't it? Apart from really black belt gradings and stuff like that, and competitions, and even a lot of the sort of black belt pre-gradings, it's not always done. And I know obviously it's good from protecting people's joints and everything else, but you do miss out on a lot of the focus, the power, the distance, all that stuff that comes with, because you hit a board wrong a couple of times, you make sure you get that technique right before you do it again.
It's about the confidence as well. I think, teaching destruction now is really difficult because like we just said, I was doing destruction from blue belt upwards at gradings and tournaments. I have that confidence now when going for destruction. And I think that's really hard to teach once you're already a black belt.
Yes,
it is. But also, I think if you have to break boards or hit the boards in your gradings at an early grade, I remember doing it from being a 10-year-old child, having to break, and that formed my techniques. The ball of your foot in your turning kick, and I think a lot of the time you get to black belt, you've already learned. Your body's already got that muscle memory, and it's very hard to reteach how to break the boards correctly and use the correct techniques and really get that focus on the correct foot parts, and then also the execution of the kick as well.
Well, we do a lot of that kind of everything. A lot of what we do is it hits the target and then pulls back almost. We're semi-contact sparring, so it's not all the way through, and even the pad work
only to the body. So only semi-contact to the head.
Yeah, I mean, people would debate whether it's semi-contact, I'm sure, but
indeed,
that pad work is all about the sort of focus and speed and stuff, and we rarely do the whole go through with all power with everything we've got, just let it go, and that's also hard to teach. So that's why many people kind of stop on the board and don't really push through. And
but even when you watch a lot of black belt patterns, some you look hard enough, you'll see people kicking with their insteps in their patterns rather than the ball of the foot, wouldn't they? Or you
the execution of a really good side kick, high chamber, and then push through. They get quite wonky sometimes, don't they? When
they hinge it, don't they? They tend to hinge, and then it slides. You see how many times it's in the board just slide out the holder, because they're not bringing it across.
I'll be keeping a close eye on you at your next grading, then, Gavin, to see your superb execution.
I don't mind breaking. I quite enjoy breaking. I just don't like doing it off my left.
Fair enough. So let's talk about then moving a step forward. So you've done that. How did you get through your black belt grading? How was that?
I remember being really nervous for the black belt grading. But there's obviously the process of going through sort of a pre-grading and the black belt training sessions and all of that kind of thing. And I was training 6 nights a week coming up to my black belt grading. So as a black stripe, I would go, as I just said, we could train all over the Southwest. So I would train 6 nights a week, and sometimes I would train at one club, drive over to another and train again, same night. So I felt prepared, but obviously it's something you dream of when you start. So of course you're massively nervous.
Big expectations on yourself, isn't there?
Yeah, huge, and you don't want to mess it up. And I think my general character is to try and be the best I can be at whatever I decide to do. And if I failed, I failed, but I wanted to know that I done my best, the best I could be.
So did you ever fail any of your gradings?
I didn't, no. So I graded on time and didn't fail any. So
have you got any
better than Gavin and I then?
Yeah, we both failed. I failed my black stripe. Jackson failed his second. Was it second down, wasn't it?
Second down, yeah. That was the most devastating day of my life. I've never had so much pain ever.
And I think there's a misunderstanding that people think that you can't fail.
That's right.
So actually, then when people find out you can, you have to up your game then, don't you?
That's right,
It always sends a big shockwave through the club as well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
When you return home and all of a sudden, so-and-so passed. Oh, yeah, no, you failed. It's like, what?
Yeah.
People fail?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, yes, well, they do. Yeah, so, it's not, black belt's not supposed to be easy.
No.
And it's funny because I mean, you probably do the same, but I even say to my students, like, I purposely go out of my way to make it difficult for them to do their black belt. You know,
Yes.
I know the colour belt gradings, that's fine, but don't just think it's going to go from a black stripe to a black belt without a bit of me giving you a lot of grief. And, you know, because I purposely make it difficult for them because I want them to really feel as they've earned it. You know, it's nothing worse, is there? It's just...
No, and I don't want any, you know, like say, it's not nice as an instructor to have to tell anybody that they failed.
No.
So yeah, I absolutely try to make sure that all my students are at a level that I think they could pass. And like say, give them a hard time to make sure that they are ready.
They get there.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
I, mean,
going to be funny.
I had one of my star.
Sorry,
I had one of my star students, A star all the way through, and he failed his black belt. The shockwaves through the club were devastating. People were like, I think I'm going to put it back 6 months. Oh, I don't think. I had people signing up to do additional classes because they thought, if this guy can fail, I mean, he just had a bad day.
Yeah,
like, fell to pieces on the floor. But you know, if the examiners had seen him all the way through his journey, they'd have passed him just on that because he was a top class. But on the day, he just fell apart. The nerves got to him. But it was good for the club because it really helped raise the standard.
Yeah, I never want one of my students to fail, but like you say, it can be good for the club.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
So when did you get into
the next one? I was actually the next black belt grade is going to be interesting. Having obviously come out of the pandemic, and it's been non-contact for like a year and a half or whatever, no sparring, nothing. All of a sudden, it's like, right, you didn't realise you're sparring again in your black belt. Going, what? What? I'm not sparring. I just thought I could get my black belt by doing my patterns. I'm like, no way, mate. You know, so thing is, you have to. Thing is, though, I know it's been difficult, obviously, for the association as well to keep people's and instructors to keep people's enthusiasm. But you know, to me, if you're going to do a black belt, you need to have sparred in it, don't you?
Yeah.
Because you're going to get that question, aren't you? So tell me what happened when you did your black belt. Oh well, I did a few moves in thin air. Did you actually have to hit anyone? No, I didn't hit anyone. You know, I just did a few moves in thin air and passed. You know,
that was it. I mean, we have a rule in our club: you can't take your black belt grading unless you've gone to a competition to compete. Not necessarily in sparring, patterns or sparring, but you've got to compete because the next month you could be sitting on the side of a square officiating and you've had no experience of what those competitors have been feeling.
I don't say they have to, but I really advise it. And aside from the fact that you could be officiating and have no idea what you're officiating, I also think it's really important as a black belt to have experienced that, because if a yellow belt comes up to you and says, I'm thinking of doing a tournament, what do you think? And you say, as a black belt, I've no idea, I've never done one.
It
you
doesn't bode well, does it?
It doesn't. So I always encourage them. And luckily, so far, everybody in my club that...
So you're nice in the Southwest. We insist.
The thing is, not just on that side. I always say to my lot, I said, look, you know, when you're a black belt and people find out that you're a black belt, you could get challenged one day. You know what I mean? If you're at school, okay, you're a black belt, are you? Come on, then let's see what you've got. And if you've never ever been in any type of situation which really puts you out your comfort zone, I mean, okay, yeah, I understand gradings and things like that, but a competition is different, isn't it? When you spar in a competition, you get that, you feel sick, you're nervous, energy, you know, your legs go heavy, and it's all of those same emotions that you go through in a real fight. But it's not like a big dump, obviously. You know, in a real situation, you get a big dump of that nervous energy. But then it's a gradual thing, but it still helps you feel it.
Yeah,
and I think
I was literally just talking to some of my students about that this week. You know, about obviously talking about coming back to doing sparring after so long, and you know, and sort of how many people fear it. And that I agree with you. I don't feel like you can be a black belt unless you can at least take a hit. In a sparring sense, you know, in almost the safety of sparring with safety equipment, because how can you be a black belt if you can't do that? And also, like you say, it's about that shock of when you first get hit. And actually, thinking back to my first tournament, that's probably one of the things that sticks in my head. Is like, hey, he actually hit me. Yeah, exactly. But you know, eventually, that you become able to react off the back of that, and not in a positive way, and not just be
you become familiar with those emotions, don't you?
Yeah.
And the adrenaline and that fear of dread. And you know, it's something I talk to our parents about quite a lot. When you feel that, whether it's going for a job interview, whether it's you're walking into an uncomfortable environment of whatever type, or whether you're in a conflict situation, it's the same feeling. but because you've experienced it and you've been introduced to it gradually, you can control it, and then you can perform better all the way through.
Yeah, and that's one of the beauties of martial arts in my head. It's like I've definitely been to job interviews or anything where I might have had to do a presentation or anything, and I kind of tell myself, it's like, this can't be any harder than going for your black belt. It's not going to be any harder than going for your black belt.
Let me ask you this then, Debbie. I bet you've never bowed coming out of a job interview before. I have.
I'd like to say no, but I feel like I might have, because it's that intense situation. It takes you right back.
You shake hands, thank you very much, and then bow as you're about to leave, and you're thinking, what am I doing?
Yeah. Or shake hands and put them in an arm lock or something. Sorry, it's reactive.
Yeah. So talk us through then your fighting career, because you've been a multiple world champion 3 times, ladies heavyweight champion. So you spoke about your first competition. Talk us through your first black belt competition, because that's normally quite pivotal, isn't it? As you move up against those more superior technical fighters.
Yeah, definitely. So I remember watching the World Championships in '94, and I was only a blue belt. And I remember watching, and back then only black belts could take part in the World Championships. Mm-hmm. So that in itself was a spectacular sight, just seeing all those black belts from all the different countries and stuff. And I remember watching it, and I remember thinking that I want to do that. And not only do I want to do that, I want to be part of the England team doing that. So obviously in my mind, I had to kind of obviously get my black belt first, and and improve my own sparring and be winning regularly. And there was a lot to be done, but that was my big goal. And I'm a massive believer in like setting a goal and little goals to get to that goal, but don't lose sight of that big goal. And if you're only looking at that big goal and then you don't look at the little goals, how do you get there? And then you get disheartened.
How can you climb that staircase?
Yeah, exactly.
You never seem to be able to reach it. You've got to have those intermediate steps.
One step at a time. And so that was definitely always in my mind from sort of blue belt about what I kind of wanted to try and achieve. And I didn't win all the time as a colour belt at all. Sometimes I didn't win anything. I was often in the medals, but not always gold. There was some definite sort of faults in what I could do. I remember hearing some, when you're listening to the other person's coach, get on the inside. She can't do anything once you get on the inside of her legs. And I thought, yeah, that's true, actually. So I kind of
let's keep her on the outside.
Yeah. So if I couldn't, that was what people were starting to learn about me. So I worked really, really hard on my hands and being able to fight when they were a lot closer than sort of at distance.
How did you do that? Did you do that within Taekwondo, or did you go out to boxing?
I just drilled more punching drills rather than kicking drills. I did a lot of bag work. And just kind of almost a mindset as well, kind of just the focus of getting close to the bag and not being pressured. And I would work with Mr. Tomlin would do sessions with me, and he would just push me really hard with the pads and just get really close, which was the bit that I was uncomfortable about. And I just slowly improved on that. But also as a black stripe, I started to go up to squad training because Mr. Tomlin said that I should. He said that's really where you need to go next if you want to improve. People like Jane Lambert encouraged me to go up as well, and they were going up, so she was like, come up, we're all going up. And I remember Mr. Tomlin driving me up for the first few times because I didn't really know anybody, so he came up with me. I'll always be grateful for him for that, definitely, pushing me forwards and pushing me to be the best I could be. And him knowing
it's not a short journey, is it, for you?
No. He knew.
Where was that at the time? Loughborough,
Hinckley. At Hinckley, yeah. So he knew that was my best sort of way of getting better. And I remember as a colour belt, people always saying, black belt division, so much harder, it's going to be much tougher, it's much tougher. And I was like, no, I've gone up from yellow belt to green, and that wasn't that big a deal. And then green to blue, that wasn't that big a deal. And, up to red, that wasn't that big a deal. And then my first black belt tournament was about a month after I got my black belt. It was the British Championships. And I did get through the first few rounds, and I got through to the final, and I was fighting Nikki Lines.
Okay.
And I remember, and it was the first time that I sparred somebody who was as tall as I was. I mean, I'm about half an inch taller maybe, but it was the first time I fought anybody remotely my height. And I remember looking over, and she looks pretty serious and tough when she's got her sparring equipment on, and she had her sleeves slightly rolled up. and she looked really serious and really tough. And I looked down at her belt, and she was already a second dan, and I'd literally just got my first dan, and I was like, this is
go on, Nikki. She's from our club, you know that.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah, I went to school with Nikki.
Yeah, it was utterly terrifying. She looked terrifying. It was terrifying. I did win though. I don't know how. I'm pretty certain she beat me in the following tournament. But yeah, I did won that one, my first black belt tournament. And I remember coming away going, yeah, that is very different to a colour belt tournament.
So was that the first time you did a continuous?
No, you did continuous from blue belt upwards.
Okay.
Yeah. So that wasn't such a big deal, but I actually preferred it continuous anyway to point stop.
Yeah, it's a bit. I mean, some people just can't handle the change, can they?
No.
Certainly not now. If you're a point specialist, if you like, and all of a sudden it's like, right, you're continuous now. You know, it's quite. I mean, you have to adopt. You have to change your whole style. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I've obviously started fighting in execs, which went back to point stop, which is not my favourite, and that was, like you say, I had to almost relearn it.
Yeah.
But the problem is with point stop, it can be so hit and miss on some of the judging as well, can it? Sometimes, you know, especially, you know, you're there and you might get caught with just an arm sticking out that, you know, I was thinking, there's nothing. Well, at least we're continuous. You know, you can, you know, win or lose. You can say, look, you know, if I lost, I just didn't do enough on the day. No. You know, because you've got your opportunity there, haven't you? You can't put it down to a single point.
Definitely.
So through your career then, talk us through some of the fighting highlights. So how long did it take for you to get into the England ladies squad?
So I'd obviously started squad training as a black stripe. So that was that part of it, kind of, you know, have to go regularly to squad training as well as be winning tournaments to be selected. So I'd already got into kind of going up to squad training regularly. I went to Holland for the European Championships the year after I got my black belts in '96. That was my first international competition. I wasn't part of the team, but they used to take more of a squad then, so they used to pay for other people. So that was the first time they kind of paid for me to go somewhere. Again, got into the final for that and ended up sparring Natalie Francis from Holland. So from Holland, in Holland. So I remember her punching me in the nose and it just pouring with blood, like filled my hands with blood pouring. And the medics kind of dragged me off and stuffed cotton wool up my nose and sent me back out. And I sparred some more. And I just remember wanting it to end because I was like bleeding everywhere and
blood everywhere.
Yeah. I think it went to an extension. I was like, no, please no, just want to let it end. And she
someone really just make a decision.
Yeah, anybody. Yeah, so she did win, so I got silver in that, but again was just really pleased. And I just remember the whole environment being just incredible. They had an opening ceremony, all of that kind of thing, which just feels incredible to be representing your country at something. I mean,
how were your team members? Were they welcoming you into
the
squad?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, always. Everybody's always so friendly, and everybody just tries to help each other be the best they can be as well, which is really good. And I used to travel up to squad training with Jane Lambert and Becky Riggs, Richard Brown, and we used to sort of take it in turns driving. So we only had to drive every sort of third or fourth week.
So you could have a sleep on the way home, you mean?
Yeah. And Hinkley's like a good 2.5 hours drive for me. And it used to start at 9 as well. So it'd be, I basically got up there, done a whole squad training session before my body realised what happened to it, I think. So that was quite good. But so that was not my first selection. I got selected to go to Russia, I think a year later, 97. And that was a really, really brilliant trip. And it was just the team then. And that was the first time it was just me and Steph Harris and Jane that went to that one from the women. That was really good. I didn't actually get to spar in the end though, because we got there at the tournament and we were getting changed in the changing rooms, and two shorter than me women that clearly were in my division literally looked me up and down and went, "Heavyweight?" And I was like, yeah. And by the time we came to the actual fight, they'd gone.
By association, perfect. That's even better, isn't it?
I ended up being bag watcher. But it was brilliant. It was a brilliant event, and that was my initiation with Cardinal Puff Puff. That was that day. but it was also Gordon Fern's initiation, and he messed it up so many times. By the time I got to do it, I knew what to do and nailed it first time.
Oh yeah, that's even better, learning from someone else's failures, eh? So talk us through some of the World Championship competitions that you've won then.
Okay, so my first World Championships was 98 in Birmingham, which I think is by far the best World Championships I've attended. It was just, the atmosphere was brilliant. Again, it was just black belts at that particular one. And again, they did the finals at the end of the day. And they basically moved everybody into another hall with just one ring that was floodlit, basically. And everybody was just around that ring, and they just went through each of the weight divisions and the finals for that. Again, I fought Nikki in the final for that one. And again, I'm pretty certain we went to quite a few extensions. And yeah, so I was pretty relieved when I saw my hand go up. Actually, it was Ray Gale that was the official for that.
Did he need a stepladder to get that hand in the air?
Yeah, I think he did it by my elbow.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was pretty relieved to see my hand go in the air. And then the following day we did the team event, and we won that as well. The women won that as well, so that was pretty special.
And you performing patterns as well, Debbie, most of the time?
I did always do patterns, but I wasn't particularly good at them. And I did it as like a warm-up, really, or a bit of a distraction. I actually find them much more stressful than sparring.
It's like having the first round, isn't it? It's like having your first round before your first round.
Yeah, definitely. It was only when I really sort of retired from sparring that I started to improve on my patterns, to start winning things at that. But yeah, I wasn't much of a patterns person, but did them every time, just for that. Get out there and do it.
I always found doing the patterns first just got rid of those psychological nerves. Because I'd rather go and fight 2-on-1 in a competition than go out and do my pattern. I absolutely hate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that Chunji is a killer, Jackson, isn't it?
I know, yeah. I mean, you still can't get... I was always telling him about his stances still. Awful.
The thing is as well, when you're a bigger person, it's patterns don't generally look as good on bigger people than smaller. If you're smaller and compact, your kicks tend to look better. Everything looks more,
Couldn't agree more. But in seriousness, it is true. It is true, and it's taken me a really long time to kind of get a style that is not so disliked by the judges.
I mean, I've seen some of the couple of the American heavyweight men, and they've got it down to a T. Because again, you normally look at the smaller, more compact, shorter legs, shorter limbs, isn't it? You just look less, I suppose, gangly or more control.
Clumsy.
Yeah. But some of these guys, Steve Miller, you'll know Steve Miller, and the Canadian chap, Chris, I think it is. They do moo-moo, and they're doing it like lightweights, but they are big 6'5", 6'7" guys, and they're really mastered it.
Yeah,
we need to get them on, actually, Gavin.
Yeah, no, we should.
Definitely.
No, we should.
They're really nice guys, so yeah, definitely.
So who would you say? So you mentioned Nikki Lyons a couple of times there. Would you say she was your biggest nemesis over the years?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it was nearly always us two in the final, and actually, it just made me a better fighter, because I could never just rest on my laurels, because she was always there. We both always went squad training. We were both always in the finals. So if she was beating me regularly, then I would lose my spot on the squad. So yeah,
did that happen?
No, it didn't actually. I just always managed to stay just ahead all of the time, just about. So I think having her there all the time just made me a better fighter, and probably her a better fighter too, because we just couldn't cruise it. And obviously, like I say, I fought her in the first World Championships in the final, and my last World Championships I fought her in the final as well. The one in the middle, I actually ended up fighting the Dutch girl again in Holland, the one that made my nose bleed, and I beat her that time. So,
good.
So that was good.
Revenge. Yeah.
But yeah, so in that respect, it was like having a international final at every single tournament, because Nikki was always up there and with that kind of level as well. So I couldn't ever rest, really, and it was what pushed me and drove me. And when I was training in the gym, I would always be thinking, I bet Nikki's training in the gym. It's like, if I don't do it, she is.
Run. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
exactly.
I know
so it was definitely the sort of making of me, definitely.
How would you sort of define your style then, Debbie? You know, because I say obviously you've been really sort of super successful in the ladies heavyweight division over a number of competitions. And every 3-4 years the world championships, right? So so it's quite a big span.
Yeah.
I mean, how would you sort of define your sort of fighting style? I suppose that's kept you on top.
I would say that I'd say I was a thinking fighter. I don't just kind of throw arms and legs out and hope. So I'm definitely always looking for the point. And looking for a way to create an opportunity for the point. If it's not obvious, how you open them up a little bit so you can score those points. And I think also the other thing that worked in my favour for many years, my partner at squad training was always Becky Riggs, who was a lightweight or a middleweight, who was so much faster than I was. And so by training with her, she made me faster. So for a heavyweight, I potentially was fairly fast because of training with Becky all the time. So I put it down to kind of being a thinking fighter really, and like I say, trying to score. I suppose that could be also seen as lazy, couldn't it? Like, don't throw out your arms and legs unless it's going to score.
Yeah, you're not wasting energy. Are you? You want to save that energy.
Yeah, and one of the other massive things that I learned was that actually I had to improve my fitness, because I would get to a final or whatever, and I'd be thinking about, oh my God, I can't breathe, rather than what shall I do next? How am I going to win against this person? How am I going to score a point? So I had to really improve my fitness, and that made a massive difference to my competing, because I stopped thinking I can't breathe, or this hurts, or that hurts, or whatever, and started concentrating on what I was doing.
It's just one less doubt in the back of your mind, isn't it?
Yeah, and also if you get dragged into a kind of an extension, and then another extension, and then another extension, and you've got the fitness behind you to do it. It's absolutely important, and it's psychological as well. If you don't look like you're hanging, the other person is, and they're already
when I used to spar, I used to be screaming on the inside. I would just put on a cool face, and everyone, he's super fit, doesn't anything affect him? And
I got very good at that too.
That's what you need to do. It's like you say, it's that psychological advantage over your opponent. Definitely. So what would you say then? You've been doing martial arts from quite a young age. How has martial arts helped you in your other life, your normal work? How has that helped? Has it had a positive effect?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's just great. It gives you a lot more confidence and belief in yourself. Like I referred to earlier, if I'm doing an interview, and I kind of tell myself it can't be any harder than the gradings that I've done, or the teaching that I do, or any of that. It certainly looks good on your CV as well when you say that you're a 3-time world champion in Taekwondo. Usually that's generally the first question anybody asks you when they do actually.
A real good icebreaker, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're not going to beat me up, are you?
It's definitely opened some doors. Definitely opened some doors for me in that respect. But yeah, I think it's the respect. It's the tenets, isn't it, of Taekwondo? Definitely, you spill that out into your everyday life, and that just generally makes you a good person and a likable person, and who achieves and wants to do the best they can for themselves and for other people.
No, definitely. So obviously we're the motivated martial artists. What has kept you motivated in martial arts, and particularly into Taekwondo, all these years then? What would you say that one thing that's kept you motivated?
Yeah, so my first focus was sparring and getting on the squad and that kind of thing. And I did open a club, my first club in 96, just about a year after I got my black belt. But it was kind of almost more of a hobby then, alongside my own training.
Yeah. Collecting the pound coins in the tin when people came in.
Yeah. and like, no, you can't train. You're younger than 7. I'm not doing that kind of thing.
No kids.
Yeah, exactly. No kids back then. Just because that's what I enjoyed. So my main motivation then was sparring, and then when I kind of as you move through the martial arts journey, there's so much more, and when you get your black belt, so much more opens up to you. And like I referred to just then, improving on my patterns and making sure that that wasn't my weakest part, and that I was starting to try and medal at competitions at patterns. So that's another thing I can work on. And then when I focused a little more on my clubs and then it's the focus on how you can improve your students' journey and make sure they can be the best they can be, and motivate them and enthuse them and allow them to push themselves out of their comfort zone and believe in themselves. And for me, it's just about continuously improving yourself. So for me, if I could be a better person tomorrow than I was today, then that's a move forwards in my eyes, and definitely putting myself out of my comfort zone. Comfort zone's a lovely place to be, but nothing grows there.
So, I've got that on my wall somewhere. Hang on, I've got it somewhere.
Just to prove it. There it is.
Yeah, nobody changed it depending on which guest he's got.
Yeah, exactly. I've got your quote right here.
There you go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's
Gavin age 2, that picture.
Yeah. It's very good. Good drawing.
I'll put it on there.
But yeah, so for me, it is about, I think that's, like you say, about the martial arts spilling over into your everyday person as well. That I think that's, which came first? Was that part of me anyway? Or is that the martial arts in me that just wants to be, like I say, the best that I can be? That doesn't need to be the best in the world. It just is the best that I can be, and continually improve and not be stagnant.
Self-development, isn't it?
Yeah, and not just for myself, but for, like I say, for my students, and showing them that journey. And I think that's more important than ever nowadays. And now that I do teach children, and I think the one thing as martial arts instructors we can do is to at least teach them that you still have to work for some things, and that you can't just order it today and it arrive on your doorstep tomorrow, and that you have it right now. I know.
You're joking, aren't you?
Well, I think you probably can order a black belt on the internet and have it tomorrow.
You can get it in 4 hours now, Amazon.
Wow. I should have known that. 30 years they've given to this.
Yeah, Morrison's. So on the self-development thing, I'm curious, do you listen to audiobooks?
I do. I listen to audiobooks and podcasts and things like that. I've been listening to one recently. It's The Performance. Can't remember what the second bit is, but it's really good. It is a lot about the sports people and their mindsets as well, which I think is really interesting. Yeah.
It's funny, isn't it? Because when you think back to when we were kids, they were, if you wasn't a good reader, which I was a dreadful reader. I never used to pick up a book. But now with audio books and self-development, you can get YouTube. It's just so much knowledge out there if you take the action and actually want to learn it.
And there's stuff to learn like that, but it also is your mindset about understanding that you can learn from everything and everybody, and every situation is a learning situation. I'm not precious about. I've been teaching now for it'll be 25 years this year. And I still know that whenever anybody walks into the dojo, they could teach me something about myself, not necessarily about teaching, although that too, or about them, but about myself. And you can never stop learning, and you should never sort of think that you know everything there is to know, and be challenged. The journey of learning never stops.
Yeah, you got to be a sponge. So looking back over your career, then, Debbie, I'd say if you could sort of go back to a younger you, and what would you tell yourself? What would be the thing that you could tell a sort of 12, 13-year-old Debbie Hill, obviously knowing what you know now?
Yeah, I'm not disappointed with my journey in many ways. I think that I came to Taekwondo when I was around 18. Yeah, I was about 18 when I started, which I suppose is fairly late. So maybe I would have told myself to get into it earlier. But then would I have, in those difficult teenage years, would I have been, would I have got as much out of it as I did? I think, having done many different sports by that age, picking up a different one at 18 isn't as difficult as having done nothing and trying to do something at 18.
Sure, yeah.
And I think it also allowed me to know that was something I really enjoyed. It was really a sport I chose for myself, I suppose, by then. So I don't think I would do anything differently in that respect.
Good. So
okay,
a good fulfilled life then.
Yeah, I'd say so. I think I've been very lucky. Yeah, I've traveled all over the world competing in Taekwondo, and I've got a successful club full of students that work hard, and I've achieved great things in Taekwondo myself. I enjoy my day job. It's like, I'm pleased with.
what's the next goal? What goal have you got written down somewhere for the next 5 years?
Oh, I don't know. Should I say that out loud?
Yeah, go for it. Go on, because you're committed then, aren't you?
I know, exactly. So I've been trying to compete at patterns with each of the sort of 5th Dan patterns. And I've competed with all of them except Sosan. So that's my next Taekwondo goal is Sosan, really.
You've had 2 years to practice it, haven't you?
Yeah, that's exactly what I've been doing for the last 2 years. When's the next competition? Might not be that one.
11th of September.
Yeah, it might be the one after that.
I'll be looking out for you on the map then. I'm looking forward to seeing it. I mentioned it.
It's such a complicated pattern. I'd just be pleased to get through it, I think.
I'm sure you'll execute.
I'll just be pleased to remember all mine.
Exactly.
Debbie, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on this evening. It's been a real insight listening to some of your stories and pearls of wisdom. I think we're going to call it there. I've got to get off onto my next task, and I know Gavin, he's got to go to bed. It's probably a bit way past his bedtime already.
Oh, yes, yeah, 7:10 on a Friday. Which actually, I'm normally teaching now, but I've got a week off this week. I went on a holiday last week, had a week off teaching this week. It's been quite nice having some evenings to myself, actually.
Very nice. Got to do that occasionally. That's another way of keeping yourself motivated. Is take some time out for yourself and then come back fighting.
Yeah, you do need it, definitely. So, well, thanks, Debbie. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, guys. Really enjoyed it.
We'll catch up at the next competition, no doubt.
You will when I do Sosan.
Yeah, look forward to that.
Looking forward to it already. If I get it in the calendar, Gavin.
Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Thanks,
Bye.
I hope you all enjoyed this week's episode of the Motivated Martial Artist podcast. Don't forget to check out our Facebook page and our Facebook group, the Motivated Martial Artist podcast.
And don't forget also the Motivated Martial Artist Instagram page.
So head along for some extra content, interviews and much more.
So until next week, it's bye from Jackson
and Gavin,
the Motivated Martial Artists.